advised him to meet Ramananda Roy. He declared that there was no devotee of advanced understanding of Krishna and devotees. And in their long discourses, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took the position of a student, and Ramananda Roy instructed him, being empowered by the Lord himself. Sri concluded the discourses by, "My dear Ramananda Roy, are madmen, and therefore we met intimately on an equal level." Lord Chaitanya also revealed himself as both Srimati Radharani and Sri Krishna, this picture here, a form never seen before. Ramananda Roy would delight Lord Chaitanya with his enchanting melodies. When Mahaprabhu felt intense separation from Sri Krishna, only Ramananda's talks about Krishna and Swarup Damodar's sweet songs kept him alive. Sri Ramananda Rai was the author of Jagannath Vallabha Nataka. So this, just going back to this, there was some discussion as to who Ramananda Rai was in Krishna Lila, but his brothers being Yudhishthir, Bhima, Nakul and Sahadev indicates strongly Arjuna, but also it's sometimes when the acharyas have different ideas, then it's understood that it's understood by them that they're all correct. So if you want to understand that, just become a pure devotee and maybe Krishna will let you understand it. Shri Ramananda Raya ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 15, entitled Instructions for Civilized Human Beings, text number 3. Dvo Daive Pitri Karye Trin Dvo Daive Pitri Karye Trin Ekaikam Ubhayatra Va Ekaikam Ubhayatra Va Bojayet Susamrido Api Bojayet Susamridopi Shradhe Kuryan Na Vistaram Shradhe Kuryan Na Vistaram Dodaive Pitrikarye Ikaikam Ubayatrava Bojayet Susamridopi Shradhe Kuryan Navistaram Dodaive Pitrikarye Ikaikam Ubayatrava Bojayet Susamridopi Shradhe Kuryan Navistaram Dodaive Pitrikarye Ikaikam Ubayatrava Bojayet Susamridopi Shradhe Kuryan Navistaram. Please chant. To Daive, during the period when oblations are offered to the demigods, Pitrikarye, in the Shraddha ceremony, in which oblations are offered to the forefathers, Trin, 3, Eka, 1, Ekam, 1, Bayatra, for both occasions, Va, either Bojayat, one should feed, Susamriddha Api, even though one is very rich. Shradhe, been offering oblations to the forefathers. Kuryat, one should do. Na, not. Vistaram, very expensive arrangements. Translation: during the period for offering oblations to the demigods, one should invite only 2 Brahmins, and while offering oblations to the forefathers, one may invite 3 Brahmins, or in either case, only 1 Brahmin will suffice. Even though one is very opulent, he should not endeavor to invite more Brahmins to make various expensive arrangements on those occasions. Please repeat. During the period for offering oblations to the demigods, one should invite only 2 Brahmins. And while offering oblations to the forefathers, one might invite 3 Brahmanas. Or in either case, only 1 Brahmin will suffice. Even though one is very opulent, he should not endeavor to invite more Brahmins or make various expensive arrangements on those occasions. Srila Prabhupada's purport. As we have already mentioned, Srila Advaita Acharya, during the generally observed ceremony to offer oblations to the forefathers, invited only Haridas Thakur. Thus he followed this principle, Nami Bhaktas Chaturvedi Mad Bhaktas Swapacha Priya. The Lord says it is not necessary that one become very expert in Vedic knowledge before he can become my bhakta or devotee. Even if one is born in a family of dog-eaters, he can become my devotee and be very dear to me, in spite of having taken birth in such a family. Therefore, offerings should be given to my devotee, and whatever my devotee has offered me should be accepted. Following this principle, one should invite a first-class Brahmin or Vaishnava, a realized soul, and feed him while observing the Shraddha ceremony to offer oblations to one's forefathers. Om Gyanantimarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vikam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Girim Yatkipatamam Vande Shigrim Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 During the period for offering oblations to the demigods, one should invite only 2 Brahmins, and while offering oblations to the forefathers, one may invite 3 Brahmins, or in either case, only 1 Brahmin will suffice. Even though one is very opulent, he should not endeavor to invite more Brahmins or make various expensive arrangements on those occasions. So here in this chapter, Narada Muni is speaking about different standards of Brahmins, different duties, and different levels of Brahmins. And here he's particularly talking about this ceremony here, known as Shraddha. So Shraddha is, or in Hinduism they call it Shrad, and that usually takes place around kind of late October, early November, I believe, isn't it? Is that right? And at that time, many Hindus will come to the temple to make offerings or give donations, or they'll invite people to their homes to do ceremonies for their ancestors. And this is a good thing because they're not selfish. They're not just thinking of themselves, thinking, oh, they're dead and gone. That's good. Let's just swoop in like vultures and see what they've left and fight over it. One time I was at Govardhan at Kusum Sarovar, and as I was just coming past Kusum Sarovar, is a lake at the side of Govardhan, and something just caught the side of my eye, and I seen there was about 40 vultures, huge big things, and I was thinking, actually, they're a bit too close for comfort, and if they're hungry enough, they might not just wait to see a dead body, so I kind of quickened my pace a bit. And sometimes people are like that. They don't even wait till the relative is dead before they start fighting over it. The person is lying in their deathbed, and the family people are fighting over what's going to be left. They've got so little integrity or decorum they have. But here, this Vedic system of still trying to take care of the elders even when they've passed away. The Vedic culture is a culture of respect. So the parents, they naturally look after the young ones. They bring up the kids, just like our parents. They taught us to walk, talk, eat, toilet training, the very basic things in life we take for granted. They made sure we get some kind of education. And to one degree or another, they looked after us the best they were able to. or not. I'm not getting into the specific details of our own cases, but generally speaking, even in the animal kingdom, the birds will look after their chicks in the nest, make sure they get fed, and try to teach them how to look after each other, even if it means kicking them out the nest so they become self-supportive and stand on their own 2 feet or fly on their own wings. But it's so it's kind of inherent nature. And then as the kids get older, become adults, and then the parents get older and become old pensioners, then the natural system is the youngsters look after the old ones. And therefore, there was no need for any social security system. The social security system in those days would be that you have children, preferably a son, a breadwinner, some description, or preferably a son would be in there somewhere. But of course, that can have its negative effects as well, because if people are too much attached to having a son to make ends meet, then daughters, they become unwanted. And we see in India, there's, not just in India actually, but in certain cultures, sometimes that's seen as a disadvantage. Although there's one devotee who has actually been, he opened schools in Vrindavan, Rupa Raghunath, and he's educating girls who basically were some of the poorer people couldn't afford to look after. And he's educated them, and then they're getting jobs, and then they're coming back to the families to maintain them. So now the culture's changing, where it's they're seen as being value in society. Now, simply because people don't follow the Vedic system, then it becomes confusing. And here the Vedic system is that when the parents pass away, then to continue to bring some good fortune to their life wherever they have went, then the children offer oblations for the purification and the upliftment of their forefathers. But I think it was Yamunacharya. He said that I no longer feel any obligations to my forefathers, etc., because now that he's become a devotee of Krishna, and Krishna explains this in the Bhagavad Gita, he concludes, Sarva dharman parityaja mamikam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha yishamimasuchaha. Anybody know the translation? You look like you're going to try it. Abandon. Something like that. You're bringing another couple of verses in there. All right, so abandon all varieties of religion, surrender unto me. I shall protect you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. So sometimes when people are attached to particular rituals, now whether they come from a Hindu background, Christian background, whatever background, then they should know that simply Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is tu Bhagavan Swayam, Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadir Adir Govinda, Sarva Karna Karnam. Of all the Bhagavans, of all the people of great opulence, Krishna is the Swayam Bhagavan, the original and Supreme Bhagavan. He is full in all six opulence. He's the origin of all. He's the cause of all causes. And his form is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. And there's no one beyond him. It's not that we worship Krishna in order to attain something else. So we should know that when we take shelter in Krishna, he's saying, you don't have any other duty. All the other duties were simply a distraction. The main thing is to come to him. So if you're going to him directly, then whatever duties you felt you had to fulfill in the material world, you're not longer obliged. And Krishna will take care of that. Therefore, he says, I shall deliver from all sinful reactions, do not fear. So sometimes people, if they don't have enough faith in Krishna, then instead of simply having kirtan and prasad, then they want other ceremonies. Now, we do other ceremonies sometimes there. For example, if it's a wedding, initiation, they will have a fire yajna, because it adds to the samskar. This word samskar, just like if you have got a scar on your body, you cut it, you end up with a scar. That comes from the samskar. It means to make an indelible impression. And so the purpose of the samskar is to help us place some importance on promises that we make when we take a vow. Simply for those who are sincere, like Bhaktivinoda Saraswati Thakur, when he basically cornered Gorkishore Das Babji Maharaj and told him, you have to initiate me or else I'm jumping in this river, which meant certain death. Well, the long story, or shorter version of the long story, is that his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, told him, go and take initiation from Gorkishore Das Babji. So he went to Gorkishore and he says, no, I'm not accepting disciples. And he didn't have any disciples. Later on, it was understood he only had one, that was Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Srila Bhaktivinoda. So Bhaktivinoda Saraswati went back to his father and says, he doesn't take disciples, he won't accept me. And his father says, don't come back to this house until you're initiated. So there was, across the river, there was a log. It was quite a fast-flowing river, and Gorkishore Babji Maharaj used to walk across that log every day for whatever purpose. So Bhaktivinoda sat on the log, and Gorkishore couldn't cross. And he says, why are you sitting there? He says, you have to initiate me, otherwise, my life isn't worth living, so I'm just going to throw myself in the river. He says, okay, you're initiated. He took some dirt and threw it in his face. He says, consider yourself initiated. So, such an intimate thing. That was the ceremony he made. Now, such an acharya, we don't follow in the footsteps. Anybody who follows in that footsteps, I would immediately think a big B for bogus would come to my mind. But he was such an elevated personality. And on the appearance and disappearances of these great Vaishnavas, we hear their glories. So, such as he said to Srila Bhaktivinoda, so today is Janmashtami, we're going to have a great festival. We're going to be chanting, we're going to fast, and we're going to chant 3 times 64 rounds. And sometimes these devotees would just chant and they'd be so absorbed in Krishna consciousness they'd forget to eat, they'd forget to sleep. Sometimes we get so absorbed in our service, forget lunchtime comes. Just like the other day, Jayananda was so absorbed in his service, I had to basically capture him and drive him up the hill to take prasad because he wanted to finish his service in time. He'd forgot all about it. I said, oh, it's prasad time. So this is the start, and gradually it builds up to the point where we forget about the bodily necessities. Prabhupada says that we should reduce the bodily necessities of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending to 0. But we can't do it artificially. There was one devotee who was having trouble sleeping, and he decided, okay, I'm just going to give up sleeping then. And as soon as he said that, he fell asleep. But he said it as if, he was so advanced that he was just going to give up sleeping. Oh, I think I'll just give up sleeping. Yeah, okay. Maya says, here you go, have a wee nap. You're trying to postulate yourself as being some elevated devotee. Or I'm free from sex life. Before you know it, your mind is full of sex desire. So we should be very careful not to try to put ourselves in some elevated position we're not in. If we still have these animal propensities, then we've got a lot of work to do for purifying ourselves. Lord Chaitanya said, that's Sangha Tyag. We have to give up the association of those who are going to keep us connected to this material world. Just like Ramananda Roy, he was considered so pure that in any situation he was considered pure, but we can't play with fire like that. We have to keep ourselves safe. We have the holy name and prasadam to purify us, and hearing about Krishna. So sometimes we do these yagyas, fire yagyas, havans, etc. We do some certain ceremonies, hair cutting ceremony, housewarming ceremonies, things like that. But just as a devotee will go begging door to door, It's called Madhukari. Madhukari means to do like the bee, to carry, or to kar means to do, right? Madhu means honey or bee. So do like the bee. The bee goes from one flower to another, just taking a little bit. It doesn't take everything from the one flower and then head back to the hive. When the bees start doing that, then we know that Kali Yuga is really advanced. But the humans, then they want to get as much as possible for as little as possible, isn't it? If they can do nothing all day and get paid for it, then that's the best job. As long as they get an hour for lunch in between. But the Madhukari profession is that the devotee, on the pretense of begging door to door, they're going there to give Krishna consciousness. So sometimes to satisfy householders or individuals who may want this ceremony and that ceremony, we may do it. But the real opportunity is there to give them prasadam and get them to chant. Or if they give some monetary funds, we use it for Krishna consciousness. Some people can make a business out of that. Certainly you could do that if you wanted to. But there's also karma involved, so you have to be careful with that. But if you're doing it for Krishna, if you're doing it solely for Krishna, then you don't have that dimension to worry about. And just going back to when Prabhupada installed Krishna Balaram in Vrindavan, then there was great big ceremonies, fire yajnas, Abhishek and all that, but Prabhupada says that this is not necessary, simply kirtan is necessary. But to keep the locals satisfied, then we do these ceremonies, otherwise they won't understand. But clearly it's stated that there's, in each age, there's a Yuga Dharma. So Yuga Dharma for Sati Yuga was, right? If you try to simply do meditation now, then you won't find anywhere quiet enough for very long. The mind is easily disturbed with the atmosphere. Our lifespan is not long enough. Back in the times when that was the Yuga Dharma, then the lifespan was much longer. And they'd have to take a long time, just like if anyone's quite stiff and then they decide they're going to do yoga, then you begin to see, some of the people who've been doing it longer, you can see how flexible they are. So those days you had to do yoga, not for the sake of, whatever purposes people do yoga nowadays for. Some of the things that people do in the name of yoga is quite ridiculous. They have one thing called beer yoga, which is they have a bottle of beer and they do an asana and take a sip, then do another asana, then take another sip. What's next? Smack yoga? Snort yoga? It's ridiculous. They've got another one, goat yoga, where they do some asanas and these little kids, goats, are released into the room and they come and jump over them. And people think this is great. Maybe we should try alpaca yoga or Highland cow yoga when we get the cows. So I'll take questions at the end, thanks. So the people making a mockery of the yoga, the purpose of yoga is, and Krishna explains this in the Gita, to control the mind and senses by mechanical method. This Ashtanga yoga is a mechanical method of controlling the mind and senses. And it begins with asana, yama, niyama, things like that. And then finally they come to the point of samadhi, where one is completely concentrated, controlled the mind and senses. They've given up the unwanted things, doing all the favorable things. And this takes a long time. It's not something one can do in a short period of time. So the lifespan we have in this Kali Yuga is not long enough to do that. So therefore that is not sufficient. And one of the remote places I was in 12,000 feet up in the Himalayas in Nepal. In the winter time, when not even the tourists go up, we're up there looking for shalagrams. And I was thinking, actually, this is quite a peaceful, remote place until a military helicopter comes flying down the valley. And then I realized, it just reminded me that China is just over the border. And everybody in Nepal, although it seemed like superficially a peaceful place, military helicopter comes flying down, and you see the Gurkha training camp as well, not far from there. I think they're actually living in fear. Potential paradise, potential place where typically the great sages and great kings would leave the cities and go to the Himalayas, go to Nepal, go to Himachal Pradesh, and they would disassociate from all the distractions of material life. But that's not possible in Kali Yuga. And then in Treta Yuga, what was the method for self-realization? What was the Yuga Dharma? Yeah. Yeah, so they would do great fire sacrifices, and it wouldn't be just a case, okay, we've got a couple hours to get this fire yajna together. They spend months and months building huge pits, etc., and they would amass all the natural auspicious items, and the utensils would be gold, etc. So they'd offer the best to Krishna. Not that you offer the best to yourself and Krishna gets a plastic spoon or something. So the thing is, what we offer to Krishna and we never lose. If we've got that mood, then we never lose. But we don't have the opulence to offer that. Because they were doing yajnas, then there was so much opulence on the planet. So people think you can just go and dig a hole in the earth and find some gold or some jewels. But it was said that when Krishna was on the planet, then valuable jewels would be found at the roots of so many trees in Vrindavan. And because the saintly kings, they would be held responsible even for the weather, just like in Krishna book. When one Brahmin's his wife gave birth to a son that died, and this happened a few times. Eventually, the Brahmin went, complained to the king, "Why are my children dying? You're supposed to be. We're doing everything according to us. You're supposed to be the head of the country, and you should be doing all the right things to protect. The child should never die before the parent." And of course, the whole story was that chapter's entitled "Arjuna visits Mahavishnu." Mahavishnu was actually taking all the children, and he wanted to see Krishna. So this is showing you the Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, the simultaneous difference between Krishna and Mahavishnu. And then Arjuna, then he said that I will protect, your children, even if death personified comes, then they'll have to face me to take your children. So at that point, another child came, passed away, and then Arjuna's famous bow Gandiva also disappeared. So then Krishna and Arjuna went to visit Mahavishnu, and it turned out Mahavishnu was just playing some games to get darshan of Krishna. But the point is, the heads of state are responsible for the well-being of all the citizens. But in Kali Yuga, it's described in the, I think it's 11th canto, that in Kali Yuga, they become plunderers. Vaishyas shouldn't become heads of state. Heads of state doesn't just mean economical. Some of the happiest countries are not the richest countries, just as some of the happiest people are not the richest people financially. But when countries simply put financial wealth as the main thing, then that's a Vaishya doing the job of a Kshatriya. And where are the Brahmins? And at best, Vaishya. But in order to have even a Shudra, then Shudra are obedient to higher castes, the higher classes. So, of course, the caste system has got itself a bad name because of exploitation. But that doesn't mean to say that the original system isn't pure. So just like we have counterfeit money, and that counterfeit money is the proof that there's real money. So just like there's bogus religion, there's bogus gurus, and sometimes people, if they get bitten by these situations, then they just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Think, oh, the water's going cold, chuck the bathwater out and the baby. But no, that is the proof, okay, something's bogus. And Prabhupada said, actually, there's no such thing as bogus guru, there's guru, and then there's not. So guru means actual parampara. And not just parampara that they've got a guru, but they've got a guru who's got a guru, etc., all the way back to where? Even you go to visit certain temples in India and they'll say, what's your gotra? Right? What does that mean? What's your family lineage? They want to know if there's some break in the family lineage where they might actually refuse you entry to the temple. And so this is an important point. Krishna makes this point. Evam parampara praptam imam raja shayo vadu sakalane hamata yoganasta parantapa. This supreme science was thus received through disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in due course of time, the succession was broken and the science as appears to be lost. So the truth is never lost, but sometimes it's just difficult for humans to get access to it if they don't have a bona fide representative. And so therefore, what we are reading here from Srimad Bhagavatam, this is the words of Srila Prabhupada, who's, of course, we've got the words of Srila Vyasadeva and Narada Muni speaking here, etc. But Prabhupada's purpose are explaining things for us to understand the context, the relevance, and they're called Bhaktivedanta purports. Bhaktivedanta means the end of all, the conclusion of all knowledge is bhakti, or devotion. And devotion, Prabhupada said, it's not a mere sentiment. It has to be demonstrated. We have to do something to Krishna. If someone says they love you, and you say, okay, well, if you love me, can you stop leaving your smelly socks lying around? No, I'll just continue to do that. Or, if you love me, can you at least clean up the dishes after you? They're about a metre high in the sink. We run out of dishes. We need to start using paper plates. No, I really love you, but don't ask me to do the dishes. Then you think the person doesn't really love me, do they? If you love someone, then you try to please them. You do something which pleases them, and the proof of that is even if it doesn't please you, if you really love them, or if you want to learn to love them. And this is what devotees undergo, that it's not easy for devotees. It becomes easier as we continue with it. But sadhana bhakti means that we read the Shastra, we understand, we draw the conclusion that to surrender to Krishna is the thing to do. There's nothing else to do other than that. And to surrender to Krishna, tadvidi pranipeta pratena pariprishnena sivya upadikshanti te gyanam gyaninas tatvidarshnaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. A self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he's seen the truth. So when Prabhupada translated Bhagavad Gita, he called it Bhagavad Gita as it is because he's aware, and he commented that so many people, there's back when Prabhupada translated it, was like 600 versions of or translations of Bhagavad Gita. And then, if someone's unfortunate, they might go into a bookshop and get the Penguin edition, but it's not going to make anybody a devotee of Krishna because they have to be delivered by a devotee. They have to be convinced. And it might just convince them to read another Penguin book, but they're not going to necessarily become devotees. And I recall I was asked to give a class to some yoga students, and they had been reading a Bhagavad Gita by some monist, some impersonalist, and they sent me some questions in advance. And I was thinking, I can't answer these questions because the question is based on something they've read, which is not correct. It's not true. So I can't answer from that book because it's like the so-called knowledge is ignorance in the guise of knowledge has been given, and it's created confusion. And I'm going to speak from this book to clear up the confusion. I don't think so. So when I went there, I just said, okay, I can't actually speak from this book, but I'll speak from Bhagavad Gita as it is, because this is the tradition we follow, the Bhakti tradition. And when I spoke from Prabhupada's Gita, then the confusion was immediately dissipated. They said, oh, that makes sense now. Because Krishna consciousness is a practical thing. It's not some kind of pie in the sky thing. Krishna is a person, he's real, and we have to do something for him. So Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati said, don't try to act, don't try to see God, act in such a way that God will see you. Because with these eyes, what can we see? We can't even see beyond that wall. With these ears, we can't hear it beyond that wall. We make so many assumptions. So there's three ways of acquiring knowledge. One is pratyaksha, which is direct perception by the senses. So the knowledge acquiring senses are the sense of sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. We can get a certain amount of knowledge by that. Just like there was 5 men were blindfolded, and they were told, okay, touch this object. It was and someone touched it, and they said, oh, it's a snake. Then someone said, oh, it's a tree trunk. And what was other ones? Rope. A barrel. Yeah. It turned out it was an elephant. So if the 5 of them got together without someone revealing to them it was an elephant, they would have thought, okay, snake, rope, barrel, whatever. Then they wouldn't have understood. They wouldn't have came to the conclusion, oh, it's an elephant. So similarly, you're never going to come to the conclusion that the cause of all causes, supreme being, is actually a person, and that person is a little blue cowherd boy that plays a flute and lives in a little dusty village of Vrindavan. You'd never come to that conclusion, therefore that has to be revealed. And Krishna reveals himself to the bona fide devotee. So the other way of acquiring knowledge beyond pratyaksha is anumana, not to be confused with Hanuman. Anuman, mana means the mind, and anu means to follow. So to follow the mind, or in other words, logical inference, yeah. So you could say, okay, I've seen this, I heard this, and like we could maybe infer, okay, perhaps if someone's smart enough, they might think, oh yeah, it's an elephant, that's what it is. They might put that together, if they were smart enough, but they might not. So even the mind can make mistakes. Have you ever done something wrong and you said, oh, but I thought this, and someone says, I see what thought did, right? Or some variation of that. Your thinking didn't do you any good there, did it? But I thought that was the right thing. You did, didn't you? Now look where you are. So this thinking, feeling, and willing are traits of the mind, but Krishna is not to be captured by our senses. No matter how powerful a telescope we build, we'll never be able to see beyond this universe to the spiritual sky. No matter how powerful a microscope we build, we'll never be able to see the super soul within the heart of anyone. And there is a process, and that process is simply manmana bhava madbhakto majaji mam namaskuru. Always think of me and become my devotee. Offer your homage unto me unless you come to me. And yoginam api sarvesham. Of all yogis, one who always abides in me with great devotion is the most intimately united with me and is the highest of all. And satatam kirtayam kirtantomam, always chant my name, always chant my glories. Tadvidi pranipatina, just try to learn the truth by approaching a bona fide spiritual master, inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. Self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. So he has seen the truth means disciple succession. And we also have to approach the spiritual master, inquire submissively. Not that we make some kind of, I know the answer already, but just to be sure, I'll just ask you anyway. We have to be careful that we think we know everything already. Just because we read it doesn't mean to say we know it. We might just be checking the facts. That's okay. You check the facts. Maybe your facts are right. But still, how far will it take us? So in the 4th canto, Krishna explains that he reserves the right to not reveal himself to casual or inauthentic devotees. So therefore, devotees will be tested. Sometimes devotees are put through fire. Prabhupada himself said he walked through fire to establish this movement. And the fire of ordeal was that even his godbrothers didn't help him, and they criticised him. He was on his own. He asked them to come and help. They didn't come to help, so he had to do everything as a sannyasi. He was doing marriages, etc. And yeah, generally a sannyasi isn't sitting at a marriage; he's renounced from all that stuff. But because he was guru and he was the only devotee there, he had to do it and show all the other devotees how to do it. So he started the movement with no help on his own. And you might think, well, why is that? Krishna could have sent so much help, because Krishna wanted to glorify his pure devotee. So we shouldn't try to imitate that and just say, okay, well, fine, I'll go to some place that's never been discovered and I'll go and start the movement there, and I'll also become glorified as being a pure devotee. We should be careful not to imitate, follow in the footsteps. His mood was that he was humbly requesting help. We should work together. So to cut a long story short here, then sometimes people make a big show of ceremonies as well. Just like I went to visit a friend yesterday, and they were pointing out there was a chapel. Now, I was brought up as a Catholic myself, and I did go through the Catholic samskars, which is confession, communion, confirmation. And when you make your communion, then it's a bit like you're qualified to go and take prasad now. This is their version of prasad. I remember when I joined the temple, at first I thought, wow, there's so many parallels here. There's the holy water, just like with Charnamrita. When you go into the temple, you take Charnamrita, they've got the holy water, they bless themselves. They've got the deities, just like statues in the chapel. So for me, it was there's so many things I could relate to. Of course, statues and deity worship's a different thing, because deities, you're calling the Lord to be personally present to accept your service, practical service. And everything we do is dedicated for the pleasure of Sri Sri Kodni Taimar Prishashi, who are the leaders of the Sankirtan movement, whom Prabhupada has brought into our life. But so when we did the communion, then basically all the little boys and girls would get their best gear on, and they would go and do their community en masse, the communion en masse in the chapel. But yesterday, this person was pointing out to me that each individual kid who's getting the communion, they hire a hall and they do a big party, like in the States, they do this thing called a prom, right? And it's all about the kid rather than it's supposed to be about Jesus or about God. So I don't mean to criticize anybody. Perhaps it's different for some people, but this is the point they were making. So we have to be careful. When serving Krishna, it's all about serving Krishna. It's not about what recognition I can get for it, what brownie points I can get for it. So serving Krishna, ultimately, anyabhilasi tasunyam gyana kamadinavitam anukulyana krishnanu shilanam bhakti uttama. Pure devotional service should be performed favourably without any desire for any personal gain, or meaning jnana karmadya. We're not looking to become some big jnani or simply to get some nice karmic reward, but we do it without anything and without the desire for anything in return, and it should be done favourably. Sometimes we see actually that people, they may be apparently performing devotional service for some period of time, and then they decide to throw in the towel. And then if they're not careful, if they make offences, then they'll lose the taste for association of devotees, lose the taste for chanting, and material desires come up. And then they think, oh, I've done so much service, what is it for me? It's like, no, service for Krishna, the deal was you don't get anything for this. You can take Krishna to court, but you're not getting anything for it. Because this is the deal. We come to do service for Krishna, anyabhilasi tasunyam anakulyena. We're doing it. We may not be pure, but we're doing it in the hope that not in the hope, but with the intention that I will become purified, because Krishna is pavitram, he's pure. So when we associate with Krishna through hearing, chanting, serving, etc., then we become pure also through that association. So we have to keep that connection to Krishna, and it has to be connected through the bona fide method. I just remembered something very interesting in this regard. I've seen one video clip of in India. I'm sure they do things like this in other countries too. I'm not picking on India, but I would just say this is how intelligent some people are. So there's a whole black market of giving medicine to people, and sometimes the medicine is just like manufactured, like placebos. And the people who are administering this medicine, they're not qualified pharmacists, but some of them actually have a certificate on the wall which says, "I'm not a certified pharmacist." So because people see a certificate on the wall, they think, "Oh, he's got a certificate. That's good." They don't even read it. So if anyone comes along and says, "Why are you selling these? You're not certified," they just point to the sign. Yeah, I never said it was, but still, the person's not going to get better. Some of the medicines they're selling are very, very dangerous, and some of them will do nothing at all. So this is the same with spiritual life. We have to connect with the person who's been trained, who's connected strictly with the parampara, going all the way back to Krishna. Otherwise, we may get something which is dangerous, or we may get something which has got no value. And the proof of, I'll just finish with this one thing, is that Prabhupada didn't put much emphasis on ceremonies. He could do all those things if necessary, but he didn't put much emphasis on that. And he didn't put emphasis on performing miracles, etc. But one reporter asked him, "So this Swami, he can levitate, and this yogi, he can do this and he can do that. What's your miracle?" And the classroom full of devotees says, "These are my miracles." He says, "Previously they were eating meat, taking intoxication, gambling, illicit sex. Now they don't do any of that. That's my miracle." And this is the test of the pure Vaishnava. If he's got the ability to get people to follow these principles and take the process of bhakti, then that is a proof of his purity. So therefore, Mahajana Yena Panta, following the footsteps of the previous acharyas, then you get to the same destination. Just stop there. Anyone get any comments or questions? Alan?
Yes, thank you very much for a wonderfully enlightening class. All those points were very poignant and relevant to what's been happening recently. When we have people that are coming to devotional service or attempting to take part in some devotional activities like kirtan or things like that, and there are many different interpretations of what is right, what isn't right. How can somebody offer information in a way that's respectful to guide a person towards doing what's best for them?
Yeah, I think you answered the question yourself, to do it with respect. If we understand the person, so generally a preacher tries to understand the person so we know what their needs are. And try to share with them what we have experienced. So I think with all good intention and all respect, that's the best you can do, and try to share your experience. And Prabhupada says that, and this is also in the purport here, that one doesn't have to become perfect before they become a devotee. I think even Jesus Christ said that, "Come to me as you are," because we can't perfect ourselves. Krishna will perfect us by his mercy, by the mercy of the pure devotee. If we follow in the footsteps of the perfect devotee, then we can become like that in due course as well. Then, I think you do your best to relate what you've experienced. And so, yeah, Prabhupada says that you just preach according to whatever you've learned. He says that the disciple can never repay the debt to the spiritual master. How can you repay someone who's taken you out of the wheel of birth and death and taken you back to Godhead, where there's no more birth and death? We can't really conceive of that forever. Eternal bliss and knowledge. How can you pay that debt back? You can't say, well, I've got a few grand in the bank, or I'll do like this Cardinal Danilou. He was a French cardinal, and he didn't have such a good reputation. But they asked him, so if you go back to heaven, what will you do? He said, well, I'll serve God for 100 years, then I'll enjoy. He said, oh, well, that's really generous of you. You serve God for 100 years, and then for eternity, you'll just enjoy. So they don't understand what it means to be God conscious. It means that you want to be with God all the time. You're hankering to be with God, God's devotees. So although you cannot repay the debt to the spiritual master, then you can try to pay the debt simply by whatever you've received, whatever you've learned in Krishna consciousness, try to give it to others. So you just try your best, and you can pray to Guru and Krishna for that as well, that you might get the intelligence to say the right thing at the time, because when you find something nice, you want to share it, don't you? If you come across, like in the material world, people come across like some nice piece of music or some nice food or something like that, they want to share it with their friends. And when you come across Krishna consciousness and your friends run a mile, it's interesting, that, isn't it? It kind of says a lot about, how deep the friendship is. But Prabhupada says that two things are required for preaching. One is we have to know the philosophy, and we have to be pure, or at least we're in the process of getting pure. We might still be in the shower and might still have some dirt on us, but we're in the shower. We're doing the process every day. We're chanting, we're following, we're taking prasad. And also, we want to, as people who want to spread Krishna consciousness, we want them to get a taste. So Prabhupada said in the beginning, the devotees should eat up to the neck. They should get a taste for prasad and a taste for kirtan. These are the easy things to get a taste for. And then in due course of time, as we become more purified and we're not always trying to attend to our own self-comforting, then we get a taste for service. Because service is eternal, dasa, anudas. We're all called das for a reason. It's not just like a cool little tag along at the end of your name. Dasa, anudas, servant of the servant. So I think just have best intentions, do it with respect, pray to Krishna, read often, and when you're reading, take notes as well, because if you're out there on book distribution, you'll come across people with so many doubts. When you're reading Prabhupada's books, you'll find information there which will help you, so take notes so that when you go back out, you've got the ammo. Is that okay? Yeah, just like even you go out one day and you might get defeated when you're preaching. Just like when I was younger, I used to do wrestling, and I won the Scottish Championship, so I got put into the British Championship, and I got hammered because the guy was a bit bigger than me. I was in the lower end of the weight scale, and he was in the higher end. So, and he just kind of came at me like a ton of bricks. And then I realised, although I got decimated, I was wrestling with him a few months later, and I thought, oh, that guy, this is his moves. So by that time, I'd got a bit wise to it, and then I came better equipped for it. So when we're out there preaching and we come across someone who we find, oh, I couldn't convince this person, I couldn't counteract what they said, then we just go to another devotee and say, what do you do? What do you say in these situations? And then next time you're there, they say, okay, yeah, you've got your ammo ready, you're well prepared. So keep cultivating that spirit, and you become very dear to Krishna very quickly. Is that okay? Anything else, or can we finish? If there's no questions, we don't have to ask questions. If there is, that's fine.
Going to go back to the yoga thing you were going on about, and obviously you said about the beer yoga, which is totally insane. I've heard of laughter yoga, so I think that's a bit more.
What?
Laughter yoga was
Yeah.
one that I heard of.
I don't think I've read about that in Bhagavad Gita.
No, I don't think so. No. But yeah, I thought that was a cooler one because obviously laughter is. Do you know what I mean? You can't be serious all the time, so laughter for me is a big thing.
Yeah, it might bring some temporary relief, but it's, in the true sense of finding eternal bliss, which is within us, which is of our nature. It's not going to find that. It might bring a lot of these things we would consider blowing on the boil. If you have a boil and it gives you some pain, quite often if you eat too much sweet, especially in hot weather, you end up with a boil. It's like poison blood. You can blow on the boil and you're getting some relief. But actually, unless you purify the blood, then the boil is going to remain there. You can lance a boil, but if you're still, the cause of it is still going to produce more boils. So certainly you can get some temporary relief from these things, as with anything else. This laughter therapy, I've heard about that. And it's not going to necessarily purify your heart and get you back to Krishna's eternal planet. And I think it's worth remembering in Bhagavad Gita that which begins as pleasure in the material world ends in suffering, and that which it seems like suffering in the beginning, but is pleasure in the end, then that is mode of goodness. So for devotees, they make an intelligent decision with determination that I know this is right, I know this is wrong, I'm going to follow this path. It's going to be difficult, but I'm going to put myself into the care of those who are further along to help me. Just like if you wanted to join a martial arts club, you'd go and join a club, and then you'd look up to the teachers who would teach you things, and you would get the right mood from them, etc. So the same, if you want to be a devotee of Krishna, then you take association of devotees of Krishna. And if you want the real lasting anandam, eternal bliss, then that means we have to go through that process and not be too concerned with taking shelter of temporary blowing on the boil things. Like you have some of these festivals where they're doing all sorts of things, tickling you with a feather or doing this or doing that, and it's kind of blowing on the boil festival, different varieties of blowing on the boil. And it's good to have that knowledge because then you can see it for what it is. But we don't go up to them and say, what are you doing that nonsense for? We try to make friends with them and try to present Krishna conscious to them in such a way that they'd be favourable to come and join us in chanting or give them prasadam at least. They're always trying to be thinking of how to benefit people. So that should be, as Prabhupada used to always sign his name, your ever well-wisher. Just like Krishna is the eternal friend of the living entity. So we should become like that. Even if we're in knowledge that something is greater, we don't look down on that. We feel compassion. We think, there go I, but by the grace of God. Is that okay? Thank you. Okay, ISKCON Guruvanda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.